Hello, and welcome to Cairn Global's Rockpile podcast. You know, if you've ever struggled with your calling, I encourage you to join Oma and Lewis, that's me, two weathered, unlikely characters, for sure, who walk out their journey in real time, from business, family, ups and downs, out into the technology space and outreach. It'll be interesting, and we hope it'll be fun. Well, we'll try. Buckle up. Let the games begin. Welcome. It's episode 4. I'm Lewis, and
this is Oma.
And this is, like I said, this is episode 4 of the Rockpile podcast. And so we start like each one of the episodes. We're starting with a spotlight of a mission organization. Today's spotlight is on cross-cultural missions.
.org.
Yes, you can find it on the internet, on the web. Cross-culturals mission, crossculturalmissions.org. And essentially, this is a organization that goes into areas of represented
1040 window.
To 1040 window, yes. And if you're not familiar with that, it's based on latitude, 10 degrees latitude north of the equator to 40 degrees north latitude of the equator, and that forms a rectangle where a lot of individuals that are unreached people groups, that was what I was trying to say.
Yes,
and
that they never heard of Jesus.
For those of you navigators, I may have got those numbers wrong, but you get the point. And so it's, that's the area in which they focus on, and they're really focusing on areas where they do have or allowed or tolerated the Christians to be in that country, and they bring in medical, dental, and optical professionals to help
humanitarian
aid to help those individuals who just can't get that kind of care that we in this country would be used to getting. To some extent, there's always some areas where you don't. But anyway, the point being, these individuals do humanitarian. They put legs to the words. They go in, they show the love of Christ, and they help where they can, where the resources there, and they partner with local churches and groups in that area to provide schools and provide education. So it's a multifaceted type of outreach, so that we can, like I said, put feet to the words. So we're not just coming in, preaching the gospel and leaving people in the same situation which they find them. They go in and try to do the best they can to help people deal with their dental, medical, and
to integrate them into local churches,
right, sure.
So that they can be taught, and grow up in that.
And that way, they're doing things and coming in and helping. Similar back to segue into what we've been talking over the last couple episodes. When we got to Bucharest, we brought all these things with us for that very purpose.
Yes, we had suitcases on suitcases of supplies and different things and Bibles.
Yeah, well, that's because they told us. That's what those children in the orphanages were looking for, was those things that, we brought toothbrushes, toothpaste, combs, the toiletries or other things, toys, a lot of toys
because they didn't have a lot of that.
Right, so things that kids would have or would want to have in an orphanage where you expect kids would have toys.
Yes. And one thing about those orphanages is you'd go in and it would really kind of overwhelm you.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot of kids, and there really wasn't enough workers. So the situation, as you can imagine, isn't good, which is why they asked for people to come in.
That's why people in the West were. That's why those shows that we saw was there, because there were kids who were just getting neglected.
Yes.
And it was the condition in which we found it.
Yes, that was exactly the way that was.
And it was very heart-wrenching. I can remember going in and being surrounded by children. And
you couldn't just say, oh, I want this one. It was one of those moments where you just saw and felt the inadequacy of yourself.
Right.
It's like, oh, Lord, I want them all.
Yeah, no.
And you just cried so much. But it's God's providence where he leads and moves and closes doors and opens them.
Right.
And, and on the closed door thing, we decided in the beginning.
Closed doors are a blessing.
Yes, some of them are very big blessings.
If we don't focus on ourselves. I mean, the thing is, if we focus on it's a closed door because we didn't get what we want, quote unquote, then, it's going to seem like a harsh. But sometimes, and a lot of times, those closed doors are a blessing.
Yes, because when we first got there, we thought, let's separate, and Lewis can be in town and get the paperwork done there, and then there was always the paperwork you had to do for both parent.
Right. First, we had
Right.
to locate children.
You had to locate a child, and then you had to get all the paperwork done. And that was a lot of the times where I would take off and go, in north, south, east, and west, because what I was doing was looking for the parent. And oftentimes they were not in the same place. One would be in Constanza, one is in Medgidia, one is next to the Danube, one is in Sinaia. I mean, it was just everywhere. So I had a lot of adventures, because we have this old car where our interpreter is, he's doing the best he can.
It's not the clown car. This is another car.
This is another car. But bless his heart, it was always breaking down. And so we were at one of those moments where everything's broke down again, and it's kind of just steaming up stuff, and he had everything in that trunk.
Well, they had to, because they had to fix it themselves. There was like they had garages around it to go fix your car.
So I'm standing there, and we're on a hillside, and it's kind of a gradual slope, about 200 feet that goes down.
So you're in Sinaia at this time.
I'm in Sinaia.
And that's a big forested area up in the mountains.
Yes, beautiful.
North of Bucharest.
Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, yeah. It's like being in the Rockies, kind of like.
Yeah, similar. But I'm standing there, I'm digging through the trunk, trying to find different tools, and I start hearing the bells, and then up pops over the road.
Bambi shows up.
No, it was a bunch of sheep. And at first you're like, oh, how cute. But then, they're everywhere. They're all around me. And they're pushing because they want pet, and they're pushing because they're trying to figure out who you are. Some are trying to butt me away. I mean, it was getting serious. And there was like, I don't know, 75.
Well, where's your translator?
There was a lot. My translator, I couldn't see him anywhere. And then I realized, oh my gosh, he's in the car with the door shut.
He's afraid
locked.
of sheep?
Yes. Yeah,
he must know something you didn't.
He is gone. And then finally the shepherd comes up the hill, and there he is, and he walks over this big old staff, and he starts pushing everybody away from me, and then he kind of motions for me, hey, get out of here. You're in my way. You're slowing up business here. So I go over and I had to beat on the door. Hey, you want to open this so I can actually get in?
And he's in there hiding.
Another time the car broke down, and we're out in the middle, just nowhere, and we had to kind of hike a ride with a tractor, and we finally got into an area where we could start looking for a part.
Well, good thing you grew up in a farm.
Yeah, I know, right? It worked out really well.
Know how to ride on a tractor?
I knew how to ride on it. But it was unusual because this whole area was known for all the different car parts where you could, and so it worked out perfect. I just had it all worked out. It wasn't that far away. We were able to get the car part.
So you had to go.
And we went into a little village, a little area, and you start from one person to another person, and they send you another person until you finally get to the right house that has the right part. And then we get the right part, and then we're able to go. Then we had to walk all back.
Well, it's like that.
So
a lot of
it's about
places,
5 or 6 miles. We had to walk it. But
if you wanted something, you may not get what you want. But you get something to trade with down the road.
Right. That's right. And those are kind of the stories and kind of things that happened because you're just adapting as you go and what needs to be done.
And then you see God open the door and help you get, like in this case, get a car part. Otherwise you'd have been stuck.
Yeah, we'd have been totally stuck. But this is a very cool story. One of the children we were doing, we get to a farming community, and this was the house after asking a few people. We get up there, and when we say, this child is in an orphanage and we would like to adopt, he was shocked. The family was shocked.
Was that grandparents?
It was grandparents, and they didn't even know. So it worked out so well for this child because what that child gets to do is come home, and the grandparents are going to raise him, and that is a beautiful thing.
So here we go as an example, is that the Lord closes the door but opens one up, because the point is getting this young child out of an orphanage with connection to the family, which never would have happened necessarily
if I hadn't shown up at that door, because they didn't even know that child existed.
And likely they would not have known because no one would have told them. They might have later on, but not at that point,
Yeah, so that was a wonderful thing. So even though we had a lot of no's,
like when I was in the orphanage, and the young girl there that they had selected, even though that didn't work out for us because they had health requirements. It's a long story, but the United States had some prohibitions about certain types of...
And she had something that restricted her from
but that wasn't necessary for all over the world. So even though that was a closed door for us, she still got adopted, and she still got out of an orphanage, and now she lives in
Another
whatever.
country, yeah.
Another country.
Yeah,
And
so it was a blessing.
that was a blessing. So
Yeah.
despite us, like I said, having closed doors, God was opening opportunities for these children through our running around the countryside and driving
crazy
around.
efforts,
Yeah, all the hectic things. But the sad part is you're wanting to help these children and you couldn't. But in
Yes.
reality, you did,
Yes.
because you have to look bigger than what your goals.
Yeah. You can't just myopic.
Yeah, it can't be
it's a big thing.
It's a bigger picture to this.
Yes.
So not only did God use us to do what we want, what God had called us to do, He also opened the door for other people as well, just because that's how great He is.
Yes, He is such a big God.
Yeah, because that was part of the thing with the Canadians, where they're helping them helping us as well.
Yes, I got to go with. We would usually share the interpreter, and like we had mentioned before, we were with 3 other Canadians.
2 families, 3 people.
Yeah, 3 people, and so a lot of times we would go together, and you'd have to wait a lot of that, but. One of the times we went, and Nellie had a child who had to have paperwork signed, and they were a gypsy village.
Yeah.
And that was a moment of, Lord, you're going to have to protect us and be with us. And that was a lot of prayer.
Well, because you weren't familiar with
No,
their
we
culture.
were not familiar with that culture. And it was a scary situation, because it's unusual to us.
Right.
And
Well, it's run different than
it's
what we would
completely run different.
But anyway, the point is that you're in the middle of nowhere with in a community you're unfamiliar with, and
yes,
having to talk
in the middle of the night.
not
yeah.
just and this is a different culture than even the
Yes.
people you would find in the city of Bucharest. So
Yes.
right.
And it wasn't that they were unkind or anything like that. In fact, it did go through the whole paperwork. They did sign it. But that was scary. That does, be honest with you, that was scary. But
God opened the door.
God opened the door again, and she has a beautiful young daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still, when they adopted like 3 children, right?
She two.
Yeah.
She two.
Yeah.
Well, she two. But
Yeah.
she adopted 2 children, the little boy and a little girl.
Yeah.
Beautiful children.
Yeah. So yeah.
But another thing that was kind of odd, but you would go into different orphanages and they would have certain restrictions, where, okay, we're just going to bring in a child to you.
Yeah, one at a time.
One at a time. And others, you would go in and they say, here they are, just pick somebody. And that was the worst, because I just stand there and cry.
Yeah. Well, they asked me, and they asked specific
Yeah, do you
criteria,
want
and I said, I
blonde
don't have any
hair, or do you
criteria.
want dark hair, or, what do you want? And it's like, I don't.
Yeah, and they didn't want you to go out. You go in and these kids see you and they surround you, but you don't want to go in and say that one, because then
Yeah.
you end all the other kids are just crushed because you didn't pick them.
Yes.
So, or they bring kids in one at a time, and then you have to say, you don't want to tell them, no, not that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was tough,
harsh.
because you don't want to, you're not there to do any more damage, but you
No.
want to, you want to help, but sometimes they didn't necessarily make it easy.
Yeah, it was just really hard.
It's tough. It was tough. It was.
Yeah.
It was.
You cry a lot.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
really tough. Really tough, especially when the conditions of some of the places we went into
Yes.
was,
just break your heart.
and there's nothing you can do.
No.
But pray. You could
And
pray.
you'd walk out just feeling like, the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this was right after the fall of
The fall of Ceausescu.
So
they were
it-
still actually playing that on the TV.
Well, they had that.
So,
The Canadian had a
the
video.
Canadian had a video.
Anyway, so it
Yeah.
was.
So it was hard. At one point, we actually, I needed money, and so we had to call back home to get money, and that was unusual too, because in America you just picked up a phone, made a phone
Well,
call,
this
but
is
you
back
had
in-
to. This was way back in there.
Yeah. So it's.
So we had to actually make a request, but everything worked out toward the end, and it was miraculous at the end.
Well, and that's the thing is, once you're in there, you find out just how much limitations you have in getting things accomplished if you're going to try to do this on
your own.
You can't. It just can't be done.
Yeah.
So whether it's you're using interpreters, or whether you got broken down cars, or just trying to get into an orphanage, trying to get through the system, God has to open the doors.
Yes,
And
he does.
it's
And
like,
he did.
And he did. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining and sticking with us today. Please subscribe to Cairn's Rockpile podcast. We're on most podcast sites, Spotify, Podbean, Apple, Google, Samsung. Also, our website and Spotlight organization are in the podcast description. Please share it with your friends, family, or anyone you know. Join us next week. Until then, stand firm, be the light, and most importantly, pray. Blessings.